All right. The reason all of you are here is because of the clickbait that I threw out around how to lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks. And naturally, who wouldn't want to do that? Now, of course, if you know me, you know our business model, if you know our methodology, then you probably might get the feeling that this topic is a little bit against the grain of what we would normally promote. And I would agree with you 100%. But the reality is that all diets work, right? Now, naturally, if we're going to lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks, we have to implement some dieting methodology. And Michelle, I knew it. All diets work to some degree, but what's most important is the context with which we're using them. And that, I think, is the biggest factor here when we're talking about these types of things. And so I wanted to do my diligence here, and I wanted to preface this topic by saying, listen, what I'm going to share with you is very, very effective. And it's one of our secret methods, if you will, that's not sexy in any significant way, and not relatively unknown, but very, very effective when used for short periods of time. So the reason I'm bringing this up is I had multiple people message me over the past couple of weeks, and they're like, dude, how do I lose weight before summer? I want to look good with my shirt off. Like, I need to trim up before summer, which is in like 2 weeks, by the way, or in the next month. How do I get lean before Memorial Day? I've got a beach vacation coming up. I've got a wedding, blah, blah, blah. All of these reasons. And normally I'd be like, tough luck, Or if you work with us, we have some specific strategies that we utilize, but that doesn't mean that you can't get good results over a short period of time, as long as you understand the implications and the context with which we are doing this. Is that it's not necessarily weight that's going to stay off. A lot of this weight might very well be water weight, not to say that you can't lose body fat over a relatively short period of time, but so important that we're framing this in the right way, because, as you know, and as I constantly talk towards the dogmatic approaches around leveraging things like the ketogenic diet and 75 hard and low and paleo, and there's nothing wrong in intermittent fasting and this ridiculous bars and shakes diets like Optavia and nonsense and HCG. It's like, listen, okay, when used in the right context, there's nothing necessarily wrong with any one of these, but we have to have a realistic perspective of how our body's going to respond, why we're doing it, and what the long-term implications are for. Okay, so now that I've laid that out there, is one of the ways that we help clients, and one of the ways that you could potentially benefit from this, is what we call low-carb bootcamp. Now, this is a way for us to strategically manipulate your calorie intake, to strategically implement your carbohydrate intake, so your macronutrient intake, as a means to help you lose weight and body fat, by the way, over a short period of time. And it can be used very, very effectively, depending on the person, depending on their level of motivation and discipline and pre-existing nutritional knowledge, if done appropriately. And so let me lay out for you in this short conversation around what the low carb boot camp is, why we do it, how we do it, what it looks like, and how to kind of carry it forward in a somewhat realistic way. So again, as I said, this is laid out as a short-term quick fix. So if I had a client reach out to me and they said, hey, I have a wedding that I'm attending in the next couple weeks, that's coming up. I want to look amazing for it. I need to fit in my dress. I need to fit in my tux. I need to drop some weight. This likely could be something that we could utilize to help them do that. Now, the reason that this works, and just to clarify again, the things that we'd be doing this for is a photo shoot, a wedding, beach summer vacation, pool party, things like that. And I think it's really worth mentioning, I learned this from one of my mentors, Charles Poliquin, and I've mentioned him many times over the years. He absolutely was one of the most influential people in my education around nutrition and supplementation and fitness. So full credit goes to him. Again, there's anything revolutionary about this approach. You've probably heard this in 100 different formats, but this is the one that we've used time and again to help clients get great results when we're talking about short periods of time. So what is the low carb bootcamp? Well, as the name implies, it's a carbohydrate elimination diet. Now, normally I would scoff at things like this, but the reality is that for most people that are following a standard American diet of highly processed carbohydrates, highly processed and modified and refined fats and oils, and relatively low amounts of protein, well, this is really flipping that type of standard American diet on its head by virtue of eliminating carbohydrates in the forms of things like bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, cookies, cakes, alcohol, calorie-infused beverages. So naturally, if we're taking an entire food group, an entire macronutrient group. So if we have protein, carbs, and fats, we're taking carbohydrates and we're virtually removing the vast majority of those calories from your diet. Naturally, it's going to lend itself to, first things first, a reduced calorie intake. Now, within this, and I'll talk to you how we would normally increase protein and likely increase fat intake as well to offset some of the calories and help us stay full for longer and satiated between meals. But naturally and this is the way most diets work, right, is that we eliminate carbs and we're restricting a lot of calories. We're eliminating a lot of calories, and that works well for a short period of time. Now, the other reason that we would want to do this is because it's easy to follow. Like, just remove carbs, breads, pastas, potatoes, rice, cakes, all of those types of things, sodas, all sugary beverages. Like, it's easy to kind of classify those things appropriately and to have the rules in place to say, okay, easy enough, I can just avoid those. Now, the other reason we would want to do this as a short-term effective dieting solution is because when we're going into events like a wedding or a beach pool party or, something like that, is our motivation is going to be very high. So these are the times when, and I'm sure you've experienced this before, is when you're starting a diet and you are extremely motivated to do all of the things, to follow the meal plan and eat the foods and avoid all of the other foods. And that motivation can last for a week or two or 3 weeks. And then, of course, you feel like it starts to get old very quickly, or life starts to get in the way. And that's why I think it's so important that we frame this appropriately as like, listen, this is a short-term quick fix solution, with the exception of some extremely driven, robotic-esque type of clients that can easily maintain this type of thing because it fits within their lifestyle. So those are the reasons why we would want to implement this low-carb bootcamp. If you've been feeling like you're just kind of blah with your diet, you're eating a lot of crap, you're feeling fluffy and overweight, you want to drop some weight over a short period of time, and you don't have any preconceived notions that this is something that is going to be long-term, then this perhaps could be a good solution for you. Fully understanding that this is not something that you're going to want to leverage long-term, and this is the very reason why people can get themselves in trouble long-term, is because they implement something as aggressive as this and then end up toggling back and forth because they do it for a week or two, then fall off, quote unquote, fail, fall off, quit, start again Monday, start again next week, and they just end up bouncing back and forth with the same 10 pounds over 2, 3, 5, 10 years, right? People say low carb works for me until it doesn't, right? So very important that we're cognizant of that. Now let's talk about why this works and I know what we could expect from this. So what we typically see is anywhere from 2 to 4% of weight loss. Now you're going to be losing, first and foremost, absolutely have to acknowledge you're going to be losing a lot of water weight. When we eliminate carbs, we also eliminate pull a lot of the water from our cells. So this is the reason why when people go keto, they lose a whole bunch of water weight. Well, they lose a whole bunch of weight, which ends up really being water weight over a very short period of time, and feel such, so motivated by the process. why it quote unquote works so well for them is because when we eliminate carbs, we also drop a lot of water from the cells. By that same reason, what you might have observed, and our clients often observe, and many of our conversations revolve around the fact that when clients eat more carbohydrate in the form of bread, pasta, cookies, cakes, even drink alcohol, drink sugary beverages, is oftentimes they notice an uptick in scale weight. Now, obviously, and I've talked about this many times before, is this isn't fat gain over a short period of time. This is simply just water weight. When we consume carbs, we pull those carbs into the cells, and we also pull a lot of water with them because, as the name implies, carbohydrate, there's water molecules linked there's water molecules as part of carbs. And so naturally, it's going to pull water into the cells, and we're going to increase in water weight. So we're going to lose a lot of water weight initially. We're also going to lose some body fat. But very important to know that when we do lose weight over a short period of time aggressively, oftentimes most of it is in fact just water weight. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to feel better. It doesn't mean you're not going to look better. Doesn't mean you're not going to be less bloated. Your clothes are going to fit better. You're going to have more muscle definition. All of that can potentially be positive, but just being matter of fact with you here is you're not losing exclusively body fat. It's just not going to peel off that quickly. Now, the other benefits of this is you're going to experience reduced hunger and cravings. The reason for this is because when you reduce your calories from carbs, we need to make sure that we're getting enough calories from protein and fat. And as I've discussed, is when we increase protein and fat, we signal hormones in the body, in the brain, and the stomach to activate more satiety, more feelings of fullness. And quelling more of those hunger signals. So we have less cravings. We naturally feel better from meal to meal, experience less hunger. And this is just generally one of the main benefits of eating more protein in general, like I said. The other a couple reasons here that and things that we see with a lower carbohydrate diet specifically is for a lot of people, we're going to see a decrease in inflammation. And oftentimes this comes because you're removing foods that are very inflammatory in your gut. And I'm going to use that term very loosely because it means a lot of different things and can kind of be nebulous in terms of how people use the term inflammation. But if we simply think about our digestive health, when we eat things like processed grains and dairy and sugars and highly refined foods and processed oils, it can create a lot of swelling, if you will, a lot of inflammation in our digestive system. This can affect our digestive process. It can affect our the balance of good to bad bacteria in the gut. And of course, it can make us feel bloated. It can cause us to retain water. It can affect the breakdown and absorption of other nutrients in the body. And so by virtue of removing these things, we give the body the opportunity to squash the inflammation or kind of put out those fires, if you will, to start to improve and shift back to a positive balance of healthy gut bacteria, and generally just feel much better because there's such a profound gut-brain connection. And I believe I talked about this in one of my most recent conversations, that when our gut is less inflamed, our brains start to work a lot better. So we have more energy, we think more clearly, again, we're more satiated, we have more energy. I had just said that, all of those types of things. Which is really, really positive, again, over a short period of time. And that the last thing that we notice that is very, very positive about this short-term approach when we want to be aggressive with it, whether it's, again, for a beach vacation or a wedding, or maybe it's someone that is grossly overweight and we need to do something very strict, perhaps a type 2 diabetic who's on the verge of needing insulin. So we might need to completely restrict carbohydrate as a means to very aggressively and effectively help them improve their insulin sensitivity and blood sugar management. And that way, they are creating better levels of energy and better blood sugar stability, better mental clarity, as I just said, because they're not dealing with all of these crazy blood sugar fluctuations by virtue of the types of crappy foods that they're normally consuming. So I hope all of that makes sense. All of the reasons why this low carb boot camp diet, this carbohydrate elimination diet works very, very well over a short period of time for most people, especially when we feel we've been in a position where we're overeating, over drinking, and highly stressed out for a significant period of time, and we have the weight to lose. So how do we do this? Okay. So a few fundamental principles about, and I encourage you to take out your pen and paper so that you can write this down. Now, first and foremost is we have to have a protein goal. And I've talked about protein goals many, many times. And I'll continue to reinforce that for most of us, shooting for 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So if I'm 250 pounds, my goal is to be 200 pounds. I should be consuming at least 200 grams of protein per day. And for men, I would actually encourage, again, because calories will be significantly lower because you're eliminating all of those carbs, I would strongly encourage consuming closer to 1.2 grams of protein per pound of ideal body weight. For females, perfectly good, shooting for about 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. So if you are a 160-pound female and you feel like you should be about 140, shooting for about 140 grams of protein is ample, which for most of us is going to feel significant, again, because most people don't consume enough protein on a daily basis. So that in and of itself is going to feel like a bit of a challenge if you don't have the experience consuming that. And I'll lay out in a second, kind of just some examples, some very simple samples of what your daily diet could look like. Now, 2, it goes without saying that we need to eliminate all sources of carbohydrates. And again, lending itself to this, to kind of the way I titled this podcast and this episode, is I said without overly restrictive dieting, and I guess you can put that into context of whatever that means to you. Now, the reality is, listen, as the way that this works the best is by eliminating the majority of carbohydrates with the exception of vegetables. So we're eliminating all sources of carbs that include bread, pasta, rice, potato, oats, fruits, pastries, sodas, alcohol, but especially making sure you're getting rid of things like wheat, dairy, and sugar. Again, because these are so seemingly inflammatory on the body, not necessarily in small amounts, because we definitely don't encourage people completely eliminate this. But again, in the scope of this conversation, it's very relevant. Now, with that said, is eat unlimited fibrous veggies. So again, because we're getting rid of the carbs from all of these grains and what have you, we still want to be eating fiber, and we want to get those fibers from starchy, fibrous vegetables, things like leafy green vegetables, broccoli, spinach, kale, even though kale's a garnish, so I wouldn't touch that crap. Cabbage, zucchini, cucumber. Make sure you're aiming, you really want to be aiming for somewhere around 50 to 100 grams of carbs per day and that's not too terribly difficult to get from vegetables if you're eating a lot of vegetables. Just beware is if you're not used to eating a lot of vegetables and you start to pull in all of this fiber, you could really be experiencing some bloating, some digestive issues, some gas. So just be cognizant of that. If that's something that you experience, you may want to cook the vegetables down a little bit for easier digestion and or take some digestive enzymes. Now, so we've got protein, so lean meats, veggies, and then adding healthy fats. So things like avocado, like nuts, like fats from our protein sources like salmon, like grass-fed beef is a great example of, like chicken thighs or dark meat chicken is a great example of ways to get healthy fats from our foods without overtly dousing our foods in butter or olive oil or coconut oil. Not that those things are bad, they're fine. But again, without the fats adding up to too high quantities. So somewhere around 0.5 gram per pound of ideal body weight. So again, it's if my goal is to be a 200 pound person, I could be shooting for somewhere around 100 grams of fat per day would be very, very reasonable amount. Okay, and then next to this, so we talked about protein, we talked about eliminating the carbs, we talked about lots of vegetables, talked about managing your fats and choosing healthy fat sources. And then it's really important that you're drinking enough water, because one of the things that we experience when we flush all of this water out of our system by virtue of the elimination of the carbs is we're going to lose a lot of minerals. These are what we call electrolytes: sodium, magnesium, potassium, bicarbonate, phosphorus. And there's a lot more hype nowadays around electrolytes, and we 100% are big believers in electrolytes because most of us actually don't get enough sodium, potassium, magnesium, but that's definitely a conversation for another episode. So what you can do is make sure you're drinking enough water, around half of your body weight in ounces of water. So again, 200-pound male, I should be drinking at least 100 ounces of water. And what I want to make sure that I'm doing is adding some electrolytes to those waters. What I'll do is in the show notes of this episode, I will put a link to a couple of the electrolytes that we recommend for you. So what should we expect from this 2-week low-carb bootcamp? Well, as I said, you can expect to feel pretty darn good because you're getting rid of these foods, you're reducing inflammation. We should see and feel a lot more focus, a lot more energy, better sleep, improved satiety, and better managed hunger. You're going to feel really good with this type of diet for a short period of time, to the degree that it's really going to make you question your nutrition choices prior to this. And in all likelihood, it's going to make you seriously question going back to eating that same way, which is beautiful in and of itself. And certainly one of the things that our clients experience over a very much longer period of time as they slowly start to adopt the behaviors to change their nutrition intake and really start to become their own best nutrition detectives to determine what makes them feel best. So let's walk through a sample menu. Let's talk about what to do after the two-week low-carb bootcamp, and then you guys can go ahead and implement it on your own should you choose to, or you can shoot me a message back with any questions. So a very simple sample menu. My suggestion would be to keep this as simple as possible. Is meal 1. Grass-fed hamburger or a lean steak with half of an avocado, and you could have some sauteed spinach in a little bit of butter or some ghee. Okay. Meal 2, chicken thighs, asparagus cooked in a little bit of coconut oil or a little bit of olive oil. A snack, so meal 3 for the day. You could do celery sticks with some almond butter, or you could do some rolled up deli meat slices like roast beef or turkey, rolled up in some romaine lettuce with some mustard. And then meal 4 is, you can do 3 meals, you could do 4 meals. My suggestion would be to do probably 4 meals spread out throughout the day. There's definitely going to be an adjustment around figuring out your hunger levels, your satiety levels, and just adjusting probably to the intake of protein. You might feel you're just not that hungry, which 3 would be fine. And or you can certainly throw in a protein shake post-training as well. So meal 4 could be chicken breast or steak, again, with some shredded cabbage, like a shredded cabbage coleslaw. And we have a fantastic recipe for shredded cabbage coleslaw. So I'm going to make sure that I throw that in the show notes as well. So make sure you guys check those out. And you can use something like avocado oil or organic mayonnaise for that. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Then again, around your workouts, if you are training, and here's the thing, it's like, I don't want to get too far into the minutia here, but if you are already lean and you're doing this, you might need to include, and you're training hard, you in all likelihood will need to include a little bit of carbohydrate around your training window. However, for most of us, for most people that would want to do something like this for some short-term weight loss, they're probably not training that aggressively. They're probably not that lean, in which they probably don't need to worry about intra-workout carbohydrates. However, using essential amino acids like our complete essentials Shameless plug there. I'll have the link in the show notes as well for our all-in-one peri-workout essential amino acid product, which has electrolytes, by the way. It has proteins that are easy to digest and absorbed, and it's a great fuel source for specifically conditions where we are low in carbohydrate. You might want to check that out if you're not already using that. Fantastic product. Obviously, I'm biased, but we have a great base of customers that continually buy. And as well as a whey protein post-workout. So if you're finding that you're having a hard time hitting your protein goals, you probably want to supplement with a scoop or two, which would be around 20 to 40 grams of protein to help you bump up those levels. Okay, so that's really the nuts and the bolts of, or really, as we could say, the meat and the nuts of the 2-week diet. You need to make sure, obviously, as it implies, is this is not for the faint of heart. Now, we are eating real food. It's not like you're drastically restricting your calories. You're going to feel great. You're going to feel satisfied, but you're going to feel challenged with your typical diet, your typical eating patterns of wanting to eat sugar, of wanting to snack, of wanting to eat more carbohydrates and foods that are comforting to you and make you feel good. And there's going to be a transition period because carbs have such an impact on not only gut health, but energy, but brain function and neurotransmitter production. Those are our happy brain chemicals. And so it's going to be a bit of an adjustment period. But should you do this, the way that you would want to reintroduce carbs, for most of us, the way that this would look, if I'm being honest, the way that this is going to look for most people is you're going to diet for 2 weeks, then you're going to go on vacation and you're going to blow it out of the water. Not necessarily the worst thing in the world, all things considered, because that's kind of what the diet's meant for. But should you choose to do this for long-term physique change, the way that we would structure this, just so you know, is basically after the first 2 weeks, we would implement one refeed meal. Again, this would depend on how lean you are. This is what someone would typically classify as like a cheat meal or cheat day, but I absolutely abhor that terminology. And instead, we call it a refeed meal, refeed day. It's a great way to shuttle a lot of glycogen, a lot of carbs into the body. We want to be shooting for around 50% more calories. So if we're consuming, somewhere around 2,000 calories with this, then it's going to end up being about 3,000 calories and an extra 1,000 calories from carbs, which is going to make you feel amazing. It's going to make you look great because it's going to fill out lean muscle tissue and again, pull a lot of water into the cells. So you'll probably have a ton of energy, feel like you look like you have a good pump. And then the leaner that you get, the more carbs that you'll basically be able to earn on a daily basis, which the longer you do this, the better, and the leaner you get, the better able you'll be to use carbs with continued progress. And then essentially what you would do thereafter is add one high carb meal every 5 to 7 days as you continue to lean out. And then you basically just reduce the number of days between those higher carb meals to the point where we've worked up to hitting at least around 25% of our calories from carbs. Now, the reality is I have not worked with a lot of people that could successfully implement this type of dieting methodology with any type of long-term success. The type of individuals, and if you're listening to this, you probably are one of those individuals that despite the fact that you're very success-driven, despite the fact that you're a highly motivated individual, we all have a lot of responsibilities, whether that's our business, our family, our community, our kids. And therefore, and frankly, just not wanting to be that strict, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And so we typically don't use this type of methodology, but it is here for you should you want to take advantage of it based on a lot of the questions that I was getting from buddies who were messaging me or ex-clients. It's like, you know what? There's nothing wrong with sharing this because it really does work when used in the right context. And frankly, for some people, they might actually feel a lot better on this type of diet to the degree that, it's not uncommon for people to realize and eliminate gluten and dairy for a couple of weeks and then reintroduce them and actually feel terrible and their joints start to hurt or they get brain fog or their gut's swollen or they, get digestive issues and to start to realize that they actually have full-blown sensitivities to these foods. And this is where it's not bad to experiment with different dieting tactics, to experiment with a high fat, moderate protein, very low carbohydrate, which would be ketogenic diet, to experiment with intermittent fasting, to experiment with paleo and just eating quote unquote cleaner sources of food. Is, as we always say, you are your own best nutrition detective. And we want to be able to give you tools to have autonomy over your nutrition decisions, to be able to be responsible for your intake and make the decisions that are going to work best for you over the long term. Now, just because you got lean using a low carb approach doesn't mean that it's a sustainable way to make progress. And what we always suggest is, by virtue of part of our program, is understanding that, listen, your metabolism is this very reactive and very adaptive mechanism that is constantly adjusting to stimulus, both external and internal. And the reason this is important and important to acknowledge is that we can train our metabolism to function much more optimally, for lack of a better term, by virtue of creating flexibility around going times of lower carb, going times of higher carb, making sure that we're training in a way that's going to support lean muscle tissue, which is the very foundation, literally, of how our body manufactures hormones and chemical signals that are going to fuel energy and fuel fat loss. So with all of this, a sub layer is you need to make sure that you're strength training. You need to make sure that you're training consistently, and frankly, you're training hard. Otherwise, you're not going to get that much of a benefit, and you're really not going to make that many changes to your body composition. So let's keep that in mind. Again, this has been the Low Carb Bootcamp. I hope this has been helpful for you guys. And if you have any questions, this is all part of the myriad of strategies that we implement in our methodology with our Smart Nutrition Coaching Program. And our program is all about helping you change your belief system around what it means to be healthy. And in this context, it's helping you understand that there's no right or wrong way. There's always a time and a place to be leveraging these types of dieting tactics. The key here is doing it in a way that's going to work best for you, for your long-term health and success. And that's what we're here to help you with. And so if this is something that you want help with, just shoot me a message back, whether it's through Facebook, whether it's through our Smart Nutrition Facebook community, whether it's through my email that's here in the show notes, or one of our other platforms. We are always thrilled, and I appreciate the time that you commit to listening to the podcast here and joining us in the group. And I hope you have a very wonderful day. If this has been helpful for you, then make sure you share this with someone that you think could benefit. Leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, and please leave us a review so that we can get this out to more people. Much love as always. Make it a great rest of your week. Talk soon.